Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, fellow culturists, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcasting space. Today is part of our Culture Champion series, and we have Chris Reinking with Jabian, co-founder of Jabian, here in the studio. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about Jabian.
Sure. Well, in terms of Jabian, we are a local management consultancy that was founded a little over 13 years ago in Atlanta. We have offices now in Charlotte, Dallas, and Chicago, which was our most recent addition, early part of 2019. We specialize in really working with our clients to make them more effective in their marketplace. Full spectrum of corporate strategy through process optimization, a lot of customer experience, human capital, and then obviously everything's dependent on technology these days, and so we do a fair amount in the technology world as well.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take you down the human capital route today, for
Great.
sure, and company culture. What about yourself? What's your background before Jabian? I know you're a co-founder.
Yep.
And then what was before that?
Well, I came out of one of the big four consultancies. Prior to that, I was in sales, and prior to that, I ran a ski shop out west. I was a fly fishing guide. So
yeah,
I've had a full spectrum of what I consider to be life experiences that have kind of brought me to where I am right now.
Yeah, all to maybe go back to being a guide and fly fishing some more, hopefully? Or?
Well, you know, I kind of leverage some of the same zenness in my professional life right now.
Very cool. All right, so since we're starting back in fly fishing, sales, some other roles that you're in, what were some things that you experienced around company culture in some of those organizations you were in that you just really loved and you wanted to carry forward when co-founding Jabian?
Well, an emphasis on people and people development. I do, having worked in such diverse environments, there was a lot to really take from in terms of things that I wanted to pull forward and things I wanted to leave behind. I have really formed the basis of my true professional career in very big, large-scale international management consulting, and that environment is a very competitive. It's fun, it's very energizing, but it is very competitive, and it's kind of one person wins. And so there's the concept of comparing one another, and if you look from a promotion perspective, you look from an advancement perspective, there's only so much room at the top, and so it becomes a very competitive environment. And when founding Jabian, that was one of the principles that we wanted to leave behind. Our mission was really to attract and retain the absolute best of the best in our profession, and instead of making it a very competitive culture, making it a collaborative culture where folks were able to work together to really achieve a different level of success. And that's been something that I'm not sure I appreciated 13 years ago when we started, the importance of it, but it's so foundational to who we are as a company, and subsequently the kind of partnerships that we're able to offer to our clients, which that's what we do for a living. And really having a different culture and a different orientation has made it such a stronger environment for our folks to work in and for our clients to benefit from.
Yeah, so I usually find that there's a lot of similarities with people who worked in those big four because they work in those cultures so long, and that carries on to other businesses. So I'm assuming you probably ended up hiring people from big four and other consulting firms. How did you deal with that challenge of having them make the shift, right? Maybe they were high performing, they were used to that for 4, 5, 8 years,
right,
and now they're switching from competitive to collaborative. Did you have to deal with that?
Yeah, we do all the time. I mean, there's absolutely, we are very specific in our talent acquisition and our recruitment process, but one of the first things I do when we have folks join the organization is sit down and talk about the difference and talk about how it's that kind of the high tides float all boats, and the fact that working together, it's amazing to see what difference it can make, as opposed to, we are very competitive, but we're internally competitive. We're competitive against kind of the problems and the challenges, as opposed to one another. And so we do from time to time find that we have to interject and remind folks that, look, if we focus on doing what's right for our communities and for our clients, then our own career progression continues on the pace that folks are used to coming out of the high-pressure consultancies.
What are some other ways that you reinforce that? Is that like, you have team goals and team bonuses so that you get people to collaborate and break down those barriers between each other? Is it mostly conversational? Like, what are some of the strategies you like to use?
It's interesting. We started the firm with 10 guiding principles, and we have truly adopted the concept of being principle-driven and metric-supported. And that is a difficult thing when either recruiting or when we go to new markets, folks want to ask about, how many people we're going to hire, how much money we're going to make. And we judge our success off of our ability to live to our guiding principles. And the business side and the economic side works, and it actually works much better when we've found that it works much better when we focus on the right things and focus on the people, as opposed to the scorecards or the metrics. And we do have supporting metrics, and we do have team bonuses and incentives, but we really go back to, if we're living to those guiding principles, the rest of the business works.
Got it. So you worked in some other companies. You decided to go from this highly competitive to more collaborative with launching Jabian. And then what are some other, is there another one that stands out where you're like, I just don't want that to happen again? That's not a culture that maybe fit for you in the early days, like before Jabian?
Yes, especially from a sales culture perspective. A lot of the sales culture is very driven off of individual performance and individual, the ability to impact your individual goals, as opposed to really looking at what's right for the clients or the customers. And so I do believe that even in large consulting and where we are within Jabian, really maintaining a laser focus on, are you doing the right things for the clients, as opposed to, are you hitting your own targets or goals, really makes a very big difference for us.
Yeah, because I know a lot of companies, they get overzealous in the sales process. They push people into extra solutions that they're not going to renew later.
Right.
And then, there's also sales structures and comp structures that reinforce that. If you're only getting paid for the first year, then they drop off. It doesn't affect them. So they don't even get, dinged on that bad behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't have sales folks, which
Okay.
is something that is very different in our industry. We have what we call solutioners, and those are folks that really like to identify challenges and client problems and break those down. And so we don't have a traditional sales structure, a sales compensation model, and we also don't have defined partnerships, which a lot of folks in our industry will partner with software providers or other providers in the marketplace, and that has a tendency to sway one's ability to truly be impartial.
Yeah.
And so when we started Jabian, although we were approached by a number of potential partners, we have always been absolutely true to the fact that we want to be 100% impartial and aligned to what our clients need the most, not what might generate the most revenue.
Yeah, so you say you don't have a sales team, you have these solutioners, but with that, what's the sales process look like? Is it they're going to networking events and they're building these long-term relationships? Like, how does that look if you have a solutioner instead of a salesperson with your traditional traits and regimens?
Sure. Well, in strategic consulting, so in our marketplace, we have found that about 75 to 80% of our work comes out of deep relationships. These are folks that you've had to build trust over multiple years. And so that's really at the heart and soul of who we are and what we do. We do a lot of pro bono work in the community We do a lot of work in both the philanthropic and the business side of the nonprofit world, and that's an opportunity for us to give back. As I mentioned, our goal was always to attract and retain the best of the best and really put them on a different track in owning their careers. But part of that, when taking people off the road, it provides people an opportunity to focus in their markets and to be involved and to give back and to coach their kids' teams or to be board members of nonprofits that they care deeply about. And those are things that when you travel all the time, you don't get an opportunity to do.
Got it. So we talked about some things that you didn't want to carry into Jabian. What were some experiences you had that were just really amazing? They were kind of pivotal for you, and you said, I want that in our company culture.
Well, the biggest is the emphasis on continual learning and a continual improvement mindset. I think for the consulting services, we are challenged in staying ahead of a lot of our client challenges. And markets move fast, businesses move fast. And so being able to really stay on the forefront of big trends and understanding what people are going to be tasked with next year or 5 years out is a pretty daunting task. And so it's important for us to absolutely carry forward that continuous improvement mindset and a true love of individualized learning and being able to, we challenge people to identify what they're passionate about professionally and give people an opportunity. We call them personal platforms, but give people an opportunity to really spend their cycles learning and growing in areas that they enjoy, because that's what makes a difference. If not, it's just more of a job. Whereas for us, it's an opportunity to grow and to identify your learning edges and to continually push forward so that we are on the forefront of what's happening next.
So what are your favorite methods for reinforcing that? Is it like internal training programs? Do you have a certain budget every year for each person to go to a conference or training? Like, what kind of structure have you put around that to ensure that that continuous learning is happening?
Yeah, we believe in kind of the 70-20-10 model of a lot of people's individualized learning takes place by working with one another. And so we do have opportunities where we'll take our talents to the nonprofit world and do pro bono work. And oftentimes we'll pair people who want to know about corporate strategy or want to refine their skills in corporate strategy. We'll pair them with one of our folks that has deep expertise in that area. They'll work together on a pro bono strategy for the technology community in Georgia, right? And that's a great opportunity for folks to get that hands-on knowledge that comes through just working together. We also do have a lot of internal training. We leverage external training partners as well, and we do have individualized budgets for folks that it's not a blanket, hey, we expect people to go out and spend X amount for their professional development. Instead, what we do is we really focus on that concept of what do you want to be famous for, what are you passionate about, and if you want to continue learning either internally or externally, bring it forward and let's talk it through, and we'll support people's ability to go find what's right for them as individuals in their own pursuits.
Yeah, I like the what do you want to be famous for, what are you passionate about, because in working with other clients in the past, I've seen they want continuing education programs, so they say, well, everybody go get this certification, and it's kind of the certification the company wanted or the company needed, and then it falls apart and just doesn't work out most of the time. So yeah, giving the people the individuality that they need to go out and find that passion, I'm sure has a huge impact.
Well, it sticks, right?
Yeah.
It allows people to really do the kind of work and to develop themselves in areas that they want to be developed in, as opposed to me telling them, you need to go get this certification. Sure, folks are going to attend. Folks might put it into use and practice for a little while. But ultimately, if it's not aligned to what they're looking for, then they'll move past it. Whereas for us, it's very much truly, what do you want to be internally famous for and then externally famous in? And that level of development is just a very different thing than most people are used to.
Got it. So you mentioned staying ahead of the curve, and everybody has to learn in such a way that they stay ahead of the curve of what your clients are going to need. What are you guys doing to spot those trends and disseminate that information? Because I know, account-based marketing, ABM, came on strong and fast. We adopted traction from Gino Wickman, and that seemed to come on, like a storm. Once Google announced that they used OKRs, a lot of people jump on the bandwagon. So how do you stay up to date and see what's coming that you may have to implement for, a client in the future?
Yeah, to be honest, it's a challenge, right? The movement in the market is so fast and so complex that we don't position ourselves as individuals. It really is much more about how do we have thought leaders that are continually writing, who are out publishing, that are really thinking about how do I apply this? There's kind of the theoretical and then there's the practical, and we are much more of the practical application of our market. And so much of that comes together with, we know our clients, we know our challenges, which are all different based on each of our markets. But then when you start to identify those trends, you start to really think, well, what is it going to mean to our clients? Like, what is it literally going to mean, and how do we move it forward? There's big, massive concepts that may take 5 years, 10 years to take hold. And so we're really looking for the immediate application of some of these bigger trends to bring forward.
Yeah, and I would assume you would get a little bit more leeway in working with larger companies because a large brand is not going to just adopt the latest thing. It seems like smaller companies, a lot of technology companies are going to adopt those, flush them out, and maybe that's how you see them coming a little bit. But the bigger brand, that change management process, that ship's a little slower to turn. So you get some time to see how would you apply that in a larger situation.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very true. You see a lot of the bigger organizations that I'll say have been bitten probably by early adoption of a new technology or a new trend. And so we spend a fair amount of time mentoring younger stage organizations. We have done a great deal of pro bono work around the investment infrastructure in our different markets. And that brings us to a lot of early stage organizations that we are fortunate enough to be able to share some of our consulting experience just from a pure mentor and give back. But for us, it does allow a degree of insight into, well, what are some of the edgy, high-tech organizations that are moving very fast? What is the language they're speaking? And what are the technology problems that they're solving, and how do we understand how to bring that to some of the larger scale enterprise organizations that we spend time with?
Yeah, I love the idea of the pro bono work as like not only a training methodology, but a give back, because if I remember correctly, and hopefully they won't hold me to this, but my understanding was like if you wanted to get into the Salesforce ecosystem, the easiest way, it's like, oh, you want to do Salesforce consulting, you got to get your first customer, you got to learn Salesforce. It's a huge platform and a huge stack, and they would get all kinds of requests from nonprofits. So you would go do the work for a bunch of nonprofits and get to learn it and give back and be able to say, hey, I did these implementations. So you build up the experience, but everybody wins in that situation.
Absolutely.
So it seems like you've parlayed a kind of a similar strategy, or have a similar. You might have been doing it before Salesforce. They're not that old either, from a company perspective. But sounds like there's some similarities there.
Yeah, it's fun. We apply it to every element of our business. So same would be true for corporate strategy, as you mentioned. Platform adoption and newer technology adoption, but also how do you kind of streamline organizations, and a lot of what we do is beneficial to the markets that we serve, the nonprofit or the nonprofit business side of the markets that we serve, just like it is to our clients. And so you're spot on. It really does make a difference in our ability to connect, in our ability to refine how we approach complex situations, and how we develop kind of the next generation of practitioners for our particular areas of expertise.
Very cool. So you mentioned earlier do you still have 10 principles?
We do.
Okay. What's your favorite one?
That's
If
a
you had
hard.
to pick one. If you had to pick
That's
one.
a hard one. I'd have to say marathon, not the sprint.
Okay.
And so, the way that manifests itself is oftentimes we're challenged with, should we do this right now, or should we take on this new challenge or this new piece of work? And when you look at really what it means from a long-term perspective for our clients and our communities and the firm as a whole, being able to play the long game and to think about, all businesses, there's kind of the roller coaster effect. There's high highs and low lows. And the more you allow yourself to get caught up into that churn, the more difficult the management of the emotions are. And when we can just kind of take a long-term approach of, we are going to make this successful. And I'll use an example of when we decide to open a new market and a new office. We take the long approach where a lot of advisors and friends would say, well, you should go acquire a practice or a firm within that local market that has established relationships and it's a faster path to business development success. Whereas we are very focused on what's made us unique and different, which is our culture and it's our values, and you can't acquire that.
Right.
And so we take the long view of, when we go into market, we understand where are the nonprofits that might need our help, right? How do we start to build brand internally so that we can recruit the right folks? And then ultimately, once we have the right nucleus of skills and expertise, then we start thinking about business development, which is pretty much opposite of the way most people approach new market development.
Yeah,
to me,
definitely.
that's the marathon, not the sprint.
Yeah, I've been through a few mergers and acquisitions myself, and on the receiving end of that, and it's pretty hard to acquire people that have the same culture as you.
Right.
And then where you want, when you need it, business that's looking to be acquired. I mean, all those factors come into play, so it makes it nearly impossible, I would guess.
It's certainly a challenge. We do a lot in the merger and acquisition space as well, not for our firm, but for our clients. And that is always a big kind of red line up front in any kind of merger integration or post-merger integration plan is the people side and what do you want to be known for?
Yeah. So what are some of the struggles that you've seen from some of those M&As? I know being on the receiving end of a few of them, there's all kinds of challenges. Have you seen any specific yourself?
Yeah, I think everyone has its own set of challenges.
Okay. One that pops out for you?
The thing that always amazes me is the potential of misalignment between the set of activities that justify a merger and then the set of activities that make it successful. And so there's always the due diligence, there's always an investment thesis, but oftentimes those teams or those individuals that have developed that thought leadership end up going to the next deal and aren't the ones that are tasked with really recognizing the value. And so taking the value statements and weaving that into the post-merger integration plans becomes incredibly important. I've forgotten the exact stat, but over 70% of mergers don't attain the value that they set out to attain, right? And that just is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to our earlier conversation around salespeople overselling and not having to be on the implementation, right? They're like, don't confuse sales and implementation was what I always heard, kind of cliche. And it's like that can lead to some seriously bad situations. I guess it's almost the same in M&A, right? The people structuring the deal don't have to deliver on those results. They're on to the next one. So there's not a whole lot of recourse going on there or feedback, I guess.
Right. Well, and that's when we get involved, that's one of the stress areas up front is to say, no, it is incredibly important to make sure to propagate the value levers and really understand what that means to the full organization, because ultimately recognizing the value that was structured in any kind of merger is the end state goal. And so being able to make sure that those individual value levers truly percolate throughout the entire integration plan is something that we have found not enough organizations do, but yet that's really the only way to be assured of reaching that value.
Yeah. So as co-founder of Jabian, you've had this company for a long time. What do you find yourself doing and working on most on a daily basis now?
Really the people development.
Okay.
And so much of, I always laugh in that there's innate complexity anytime there's a lot of people, right? And so when you set out to create a firm that takes highly talented people and puts them in what we call kind of a greenhouse for high performers and allows individuals to truly go through the kind of the soul searching of what is it I want to do? What do I want to be known for? How do I want to invest in myself? How do I want to give back to my community? It's a lot of moving parts. And so being able to support each and every person in a unique and different way is something that I really enjoy. It does take a lot of time.
What would you say is like probably one of the most challenging parts of doing that? Of just, I guess, developing the people and working, on that portion of the business, the people portion.
I believe that the uniqueness and the difference and what motivates and drives one person is different than what motivates and drives someone else. And so trying to account for a medium-sized organizational view of here are the kind of programs, here are the kind of investments we're going to make, and recognizing that even investments are made for to account for the broadest set of people.
Yeah.
And making sure that we do that, but yet at the same time understand who doesn't fit in that investment category and developing something unique and different for them.
Yeah. Do you think, I would suppose, and I kind of portray that or theorize that the future of a lot of the human capital management is individualization. Like, how do you come up with, if you look historically, it's one plan for everybody. We're going to roll out a personal development plan, and then you leave people behind that aren't heavy readers, don't get into books and audiobooks, and you've lost a set of people. And so you can pick up the subset, but there's really only, we found that there's 20 different motivators, from behavioral psychologists that, if you cover those, you got the gamut. So where do you see it going in the future? You think it's going to just be able to be more individualized because of technology and everything?
I think it'll have to.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of look back historically and you see the concept of command and control and a lot of the military denotion of how things should be run and how that permeated most large enterprise organizations. And then you recognize the change of demographics. You recognize that the workforce is very different today than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, certainly 50 years ago. And the newest force in that change is pretty much mandating that there's so much opportunity and they need to feel as if they have a home that represents who they are and what they want. And so I don't think we're going to see a kind of the big blanket, hey, these are the policies and procedures that are going to work for everybody. I think we're going to have to be more flexible, and we're going to have to really account for the nuanced difference of each and every individual.
Got it. So last question of the day, what are you most looking forward to taking on as a challenge or enhancement to company culture at Jabian?
We are neck deep in our leadership development plan and program, and I think that's a neat thing to be able to enable and to do. By our very nature, our folks are innate leaders, but so when you look at how to build a structure that enables leaders of leaders is kind of a fun thing and fun challenge, and that's where we are right now. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, what are you finding that is the biggest area for maybe improvement, right? You have leaders leading leaders, you have high performing people that you've hired that have led for a long time. Is there a certain area where, you're just finding there's an opportunity, like better connecting with empathy? Or, is there some section where you're just like, of all these leaders, there's one thing we really are looking forward to working on?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that hit me in the face when I started with this work, and that's the ability to focus.
Got it.
These supercomputers that we walk around with in our pocket, it is amazing to see the implication, both good and bad, as to what that does to culture and focus and being present. For me personally, I have started leaving my phone in my office when I go to attend meetings. I recognized just the dependence and I feel out of place if I'm not checking my email all the time. And what that does is, it was really a lesson given to me by my sons. I came home from work and walked in and asked my oldest son how he was doing. He said, "Shh, can't you tell I'm working?" I said, "Oh boy, I know where this came from." Right? And so just seeing that kind of behavior and seeing how it permeates an office, an organization, and the lack of connectedness that comes when people want to check their email as opposed to having a in-person, face-to-face conversation. And a lot of our senior leadership meetings will now start with we're going to be here, we're going to be present, we're going to close our laptops, we're going to put the phones away, because ultimately getting an opportunity to truly work in person for 30 minutes or an hour is so much more effective than that same amount of time trying to multitask and being distracted. So
I think that's amazing kind of share that you have there of like high performing people, great experience, leaders leading other leaders, and out of all of those things, focus kind of falls out of that. And I know I've had multiple experience. I was in a meeting the other day, and I was doing the presentation. If I was presenting, one of the main people I was presenting to was on their phone. But if they were talking, their phone was down.
Right.
And then once I started talking, the phone would come back out. Same thing. I'm in the entrepreneur organization. I'm in that all the time on the podcast, and our forum meetings with our monthly forum meetings with the other entrepreneurs I meet with, the group of 7 guys, it's a no tech meeting. Like, you turn it on airplane mode, it's zero for 4 hours. Notebook, paper, pen, that's all you got. And we get a lot done during that. So I love focus as the takeaway.
Yeah. I bet it feels refreshing too when you come out of those 4 hours. You're like, wow, this has been great.
I wish I could leave it. I should leave it behind more and more. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and all the great insights.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.